Have you ever wondered how we can find signs of God in life's darkest moments? Or marveled at a family's ability not just to survive, but to thrive after facing unimaginable tragedy? These questions are at the forefront of our minds when we meet such a family. So settle in and prepare for an emotional, inspiring, and life-altering experience. We're about to dive into the pages of the Leavitt family's extraordinary story, a tale that proves the resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering strength of faith. Introducing Jenny and Caleb, who will be your guides on this remarkable journey. They'll share a story that challenges conventions and inspires all who hear it.
Hi everyone, so I'm Jenny, this is Caleb, and today we're just going to share our family's story. I have written our family's story in the book God Prints, Finding Evidence of God in the Shattered Pieces of Life. But when I talk to people about it, there's two questions I get all the time, and one is, how is Caleb doing now? And then the other one is, how have you guys survived through everything that you've been through? So I'm hoping that's what this video and this series of videos will help answer, and you can kind of get to know us, and hopefully our story can help you all as you work through difficult times in life too. So, Caleb, I figured that we would start kind of with our story. So you were 20, your brother was 17. We were coming home from a church event. Well, actually, your dad and I had just gotten home, and Jacob rode with you. Do you remember anything?
I remember the event that we did, a play, and so I was in one of the scenes. I was in, I believe, only one scene, but it was my first kind of major role in, like one of those over in our arena ministry. And Jacob was also involved, but he was in the light ministry.
I remember he was so excited. That was his first time.
Yes.
Being a part of that.
It was, yeah. So his first, major, I guess, venture into something of that magnitude. And so he was very happy, to be up there. I remember the drives up there for all the practices, and that even though I was only in scene one out of, I believe, like 7 or 8 scenes, I was there every night because Jacob needed a ride. And so, just those drives up there and then back, and we were looking at probably 30 minutes both ways. And so every night, just that basically full hour with him or longer. But then the day of the actual concert, I think, because whenever you go through some of the injuries that I had to my, a lot of places, but really my actual brain and then the memory, you kind of lose some things and time goes out of order a little bit, and so it can become kind of hard to place what actually came first. Are you remembering what actually happened, or is it more of just I like to call it a impression, because there are certain things that just because I have heard the stories of either that night or the weeks after so many times that it's almost like I've created this impression in my own mind, I guess. And so sometimes it is hard to distinguish between which one's real and which one's just kind of based off of what you've already created just based upon the story.
And I remember you saying before that the night before was dress rehearsal, and that sometimes you wonder if pieces of what you're remembering aren't from the dress rehearsal and not even the night of the accident, because there was so much fog.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, that's basically what it is. It's so foggy, and really, so that fog extends basically probably to, like, there's little things that I remember from the stuff in the actual hospital and everything, but that fog kind of extends honestly for a couple months, and so it's kind of hard to place when everything all happened just within that. So the actual night of is kind of hard to kind of pin down, so it's just what I've heard from you guys. So, but just leading up to it is, more what I remember, and then afterwards, the recovery process.
So I write in detail in the book about how we heard, but for the sake of those that may not know, Myron and I had just gotten home, and he got a call from Bridget, our pastor's wife. They had come upon a horrible accident. The vehicle was on fire. They were asking where you and Jacob were. When you experience something like that, traumatic, you always think this happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me. I know we live in Florida, so afternoon rain. So, you always think, oh, that doesn't happen to us. That you hear about happening to other people, but you never think it's going to happen to you. And make a long story short, it was you guys, and I experienced fog, but on a different level. I didn't have traumatic injuries. I've actually told people that I think for me, probably for you in a sense too, but for me, I think the fog is actually a gift from God, because the pain is so great that it like takes that sharp edge off for a while, where you can actually keep putting one foot in front of the other and do what you have to do to keep functioning, because otherwise the pain, the confusion and everything, I think it's just so much. So I think that fog is actually like a gift from God to kind of soften. And so the night of, you know this, but again, some people may not know this, your dad showed up at the scene and you had already been taken to the hospital, but there was so much confusion that the officer on the scene, the state trooper, was telling your dad that there was only one son in the vehicle, and he didn't say your name, he didn't say either one of your names, just that your dad needed to get to the hospital. And maybe at some point we'll do a video with Myron and he can tell that part, but in that course of that conversation, he turned around and he saw your brother on the road covered with a white sheet, and Jacob was a very, very big boy, over 6 feet, over 300 pounds. He was a big boy. So there was no mistaking it, really. And part of your dad's story is that the guilt hit him so hard that it literally took him to his knees. And I know that I've heard you say before that, fast forward a little bit and we'll go back, but fast forward, one of the things that was so hard for you was Jacob was the best friend to you. And like you talked about a minute ago, those half-hour rides back and forth, you guys shared a lot of songs that you would find and things that you couldn't share with anybody else.
Yeah, I think that was one of the major things. So whenever I was recovering physically, it was, and it sounds kind of weird like you mentioned, but it was almost a blessing, because I had something to focus all of my mental energy on, and I didn't have to focus on the grief. But then once I began to get better physically, and so through the rehab and everything, so it took, I think, my first major breakdown was near Christmas that year, where, because I wasn't fully recovered, but I was getting there, and I could see that it was going to happen. And I think that, I was fully recovered by like March of next year, and so, so it was getting better. But then I was able to actually focus my mind on the grief aspect of it and what I had lost, and the fact that I was the older brother, and I still struggle with that whole thought that if anyone should have died that night, it should have been me, that it was my job to protect him. And obviously, logically, you understand that makes no sense, because, the best thing would have been for nobody to die that night, for nobody to get into their car that drunk, for nobody to cause that kind of accident, so logically you can see that, but a lot of stuff about grief isn't logic based, and I think that's why a lot of men shy away from grief and don't deal with it right up front, is because we do view things in a more logical way sometimes, and it doesn't make sense sometimes why we're feeling what we're feeling, why we're thinking what we're thinking at certain moments in life. But that was definitely one of the major things I had to battle through, and it still comes around sometimes, just end their lives from hell. And I am mature enough now in my grief, in the process, to know that and to head it off, but especially at the beginning, those were major mind battles, and they were kind of crippling in a way, and it definitely held me back from doing what I knew that I needed to do for God and reaching out to others for a couple of years, because I let that fear invade my mind, and I let that be what I based a lot of my decisions off of. And if we were doing everything right, and we were so involved in ministry and the church and reaching others, why didn't God step in and stop it? That's the first lie that I had to deal with. Secondly, if God gave us free will, so once I worked through the first lie, then if God allows us our own choices, then what's to stop Satan from doing it again? If I get back into one of those places where I'm giving myself to the ministry and to God's will, it's just something that you have to work through.
Thank you for joining us today on this incredible journey to discover how Caleb overcame his challenges with God's help. Stay tuned for our next episode. Please subscribe now to stay connected with this channel.